So today on Sports File, we're taking a happy birthday look at probably one of the most hated wrestlers in the history of Atlantic Grand Prix wrestling. One of the most hated wrestlers in New Brunswick, the Maritimes, all over, who was a face for a little while, but it didn't work. The infamous Cuban assassin. Now, Angel Acevedo, who was born January 27th, 1945, in Puerto Rico, was a son of a Puerto Rican mother and a Cuban father. When he was 7 months old, the family moved to Cuba, and like most young Cubans, he was very involved in sports as a young age. As a teenager, he competed in amateur wrestling and later took up boxing, and even turned pro as a boxer after graduating high school. Now, when he later moved to Florida, he began training for professional wrestling, but under Eddie Graham's Championship Wrestling, Eddie Graham came up with a great idea that he would start wrestling as a heel, but Acevedo created the Cuban assassin persona, which played off his heritage and, of course, his resemblance to the imperial leader of Cuba, Fidel Castro. Basically, he had the beard and hair like Castro, and he had that same, strange hard work ethic. Now, Acevedo had some success with Eddie Graham's faction, but the following year, the mid '74, he began working in Canada, initially in the Montreal area promotion, but went on to work for Stuart Stampede Wrestling. Now, in Stampede, he partnered with a mass superstar we call Cuban Assassin 2, which we never found who that person was. There were different rumors, but he later went on with Cuban Assassin 2 to win the Stampede Wrestling International Tag Team title in 1976. Now, he won the crown from Ed and Jerry Morrow, and what's ironic here, Jerry Morrow was a longtime tag team partner later on with the Cuban, and they were numerous belts together. Now, with the Cuban was a singles wrestler, but he especially was a tag team wrestling because he could put him with any type of heel, and he would get not only himself over, but the heel over. Now, in 1977, he became part of wrestling history when he was trusted enough by Stuart to be the first opponent for his son Bret Hart in Bret's debut match. Now, around this time, late 70s, he started showing up in the Atlantic region for Emile Dupre's Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling, and he often toured with him over the summers. And this is where the Cuban became legendary in the Maritimes. Now, to describe the Cuban's ring entrance is very unique and very simple. He would come in and almost sniff the air or judge the crowd, and he would walk with a strut, a very strong presence, and the fans would go absolutely, completely nuts in a negative way towards the Cuban. In many cases, I've seen events at the Belle Lune Arena, different rings, where people tried to attack the Cuban, tried to jump in the ring to take him on. In certain cases, people brought knives and tried to stab him. And he wasn't really a person to verbally or mentally attack the audience. He just that, for some reason, the Cuban, and we called the Cuban, we never called the Cuban assassin, because when you say the Cuban with Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling, it was the persona of the Cuban. Now, where the Cuban got his big break when he tagged with a masked wrestler known as the Carpetbagger, who was actually Leapin' Lanny and Randy Savage's father, Angelo Poffo, and he became the first recorded Atlantic Grand Prix North American Tag Team champions. And over the years, he won several belts in Atlantic Grand Prix for a tag team. Besides the Carpetbagger, he teamed with heels Goldie Rogers, Bobby Bass, Raul Castro, Sweet Daddy Siki, the Face, Leo Burke, and Jerry Morrow. And Stampede Wrestling again gave him his big start, but Atlantic Grand Prix brought him to another level. But by 1982, Acevedo returned to Puerto Rico, working for World Wrestling Council, and when he teamed up with Jerry Morrow, his old pal, in a faction called the Mercenarios, or the Mercenaries, they won actually the Puerto Rican version of the NWA North American Tag Team Championships. So I mean, he basically became a part-time wrestler later on in semi-retirement, but anytime a major card was around, he would be invited. He would take part. But the WC era was great because he had tagged with that other villain, Ron Starr, had great success in there. But Acevedo went to the semi-retirement in 1992 after again working for Atlantic Grand Prix, Stampede, the World Wrestling Council. Now he would come back and do several independent wrestling shows until 2004 when he finally retired. Now, one thing about the Cuban, he kept himself in great shape. His son, Richie, Cuban Assassin 2, has had great success using the family name. Very well respected wrestler, also as an actor in his spare time. Great legacy of the Cuban family tradition. But one thing about the Cuban, like I said, WWE doesn't have anybody like the Cuban right now. Cuban was pure heat. No matter what he was doing, face, heel, he had that presence. He was charismatic without even stating anything. Again, when everybody knows somebody, even non-wrestling fans know who the Cuban Assassin is. Just his presence. And let me tell you something. When you look back at the years of Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling, the vintage era of wrestling, the Cuban is probably one of the most underrated wrestlers of all time, one of the most underrated heels, and one of the most appreciated heels by the true Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling, Stampede Wrestling, and WWC fans. Because he was a throwback, but he was also a little bit modern in these ways because he kind of predicted some of the hardcore style wrestlers just by his overall physicality. And he would never wear a shirt. He would always have the same green pants. And we always thought, did he ever change those pants, or he just wore them because, army pants are hard to find, So on this snowy Wednesday morning in the Canterbury region, we wish you a good time. And if you're an Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling fan, we always like to say, wait for the bell, because the match is not official until you hear that bell. Have a good day. Bye.